Hey guys! Tonight we embark on a moonlit trek through rocky Anatolian passes where shafts yawn into the earth, and veins of silver shimmer like stars trapped in stone, and you probably won't survive this if you don't pace yourself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. I'll pretend to care. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a dusty track winding up the Taurus Mountains, the air cool against your skin as stars glint overhead. Underfoot, pale rocks reveal glimmers of silver, the raw promise of precious metal that drew Hittite miners to these heights as early as the 17th century BCE, when the empire was at its zenith. A mainstream historical fact, the Hittites were among the first Bronze Age civilizations to develop large-scale mining operations, extracting silver and copper to fuel their expanding realm. Torchlight winks off jagged walls inside a narrow mine shaft, and you can almost taste the metallic tang in the air, like licking a spoon. You forgot in the dishwasher for a week. Definitely don't try that at home. Here, men and women chipped away at ore seams with iron picks, hauling heavy baskets up rickety wooden ladders, their breaths puffing ghostly in the gloom. Historians still argue whether the earliest large mines lay at Kestel or at the nearby site of Goltepe, each claiming priority for the first smelting workshops. A quirky tidbit drifts through the darkness. Miners wore tiny goat-shaped amulets around their necks, believing the spirit of the mountain goat would guide them through twisted tunnels and protect them from rockfalls, because nothing says safety like a horned creature perched on your chest. You shift the amulet in your pocket, half expecting it to nibble on your shirt. As you crouch near a fresh vein, silver ore strands gleam like spiderwebs in torchlight, and you consider whether that metaphor is a bit too on the nose. This is bedtime history, not a Netflix horror series. But fear not, the only thing to fear down here is missing your stop when the tour guide yells, "Next section." Just kidding. There is no tour guide, it's just you and your existential dread. The miners chanted in low tones as they worked a rhythmic hum, meant to placate earth spirits and synchronize swings of the pick. In communal chambers deeper in the shaft, they shared thick barley porridge and talked of distant palaces in Hattusa, where silver pectorals and necklaces would eventually glitter under daylight. You can almost hear the clinking of cups as workers toasted their nightly hall cheers to not getting crushed by a boulder. Modern archaeologists have uncovered slag heaps and smelting furnaces, hinting at complex ore processing techniques. They found clay crucibles bearing silver residue and even early balance scales for weighing ingots, proof that trade networks depended on standardized measures long before your bathroom scale became the bane of your weekend. Historians still argue whether the Hittites learned smelting from Mesopotamian neighbors or independently innovated their own furnace designs, but either way, these Anatolian workshops fueled an empire's ambition. Beneath the clamor of hammer and tongs, you catch a whiff of sulfur and sweat, an olfactory lullaby if you're into that sort of thing. The grinding echo of rock on metal rings in your ears, like a sleepy metronome coaxing eyelids heavier than a miner's leather helmet. At the mine entrance, you pause to run silver-flecked dust between your fingers. Its cold weight a reminder that this precious metal would soon be melted down, hammered into thin sheets, and transformed into everything from royal adornments to votive offerings in grand temples. One mainstream historical fact by the mid-2nd millennium BCE Hittite silverwork was famed across the Near East for its purity and fine craftsmanship. You shake your head, blinking away the dust, and realize you've been so absorbed that you forgot to crack a joke. So here's one. Why did the silver go to school? To become sterling grown. And another. What do you call a lazy miner? A diligent worker? No, terrible. Third time's the charm. If a silver ornament blinks at you, it's because it's a little light astray. Okay, I'll stop now. As you stand, the mind's dark mouth yawns behind you, the promise of deeper tunnels calling like an unwritten bedtime story. You pocket your amulet, stifle a yawn that echoes off stone, and take one last look at that glittering seam, knowing you'll return in dreams to the silver veins that once powered an empire. You step out of the cool mine tunnel into a sun-dappled courtyard, where artisans cluster around low tables strewn with silver ingots, charcoal embers glowing like sleepy embers beneath their hammers and anvils. The air tastes faintly of metal and dust mixed with the sweet tang of wildflowers brushing against your boots. You rub your palms together to ward off the chill left by the ore, though the morning sun is just beginning to warm your skin. Here, in the early Bronze Age workshop around 1700 BCE, give or take a generation, Hittite smiths refined raw silver into simple brooches, rings, and pins used in daily attire and ceremonial garb. A mainstream historical fact. Hittite craftsmen of this era specialized in repoussé techniques, hammering silver sheets from the reverse to create raised designs on the front. You watch as a smith pounds, gently coaxing a stylized, spiraling motif to dance across a slender bracelet. The rhythmic clink of hammer on metal is strangely soothing, like a lullaby for insomniac night owls, except louder and with more risk of hand cramps. You probably won't survive this if you try pounding with the same gusto. Steel impresses mortality faster than you can say ergonomic gloves. Nearby, a quirky tidbit emerges. Some workshops kept tiny songbirds in cages to serenade the metalworkers based on a fringe theory that their trills inspired more intricate patterns. Historians still argue whether those birds were ornamental mascots or accidental tone-deaf distractions. You crane your neck to glimpse a sparrow bobbing its head, apparently judging your fashion sense. The smith's anvil resonates under each precise strike, sending vibrations up through your boots, a soothing tremor that syncs with your own heartbeat. You lean in close, breathing in the smell of heated silver and charcoal, a combination that might not make it onto any spa menus, but somehow feels grounding. You half expect a workshop safety inspector to materialize scolding you for wearing flip-flops. Newsflash, this is ancient Anatolia, not OSHA headquarters. Instead, a fellow artisan beckons you over, wiping sweat from her brow with a scrap of linen. She offers a freshly filed silver shank, too heavy to wear, but perfect for fidgeting as you drift toward dreamland. Historians still argue whether communal workshops were state-run or family-owned. But either way, these early assemblages fueled local economies and fostered shared techniques passed down like secret bedtime recipes. You imagine a father whispering metalworking tips to his son under moonlight. Always tap lightly, son, unless you fancy a trip to the emergency infirmary. A third light joke arrives uninvited. Why don't smiths share their silver because they're afraid of a filing cabinet raid? Ba-dum-ts. And then, what did the bracelet say to the ring? You look well-rounded tonight. One more because sleep-deprived hosts overcompensate. Why did the silver go to therapy? It couldn't handle all its emotional alloys. Okay, that's enough. You wander past low benches where apprentices are dipping tiny spoons into molten silver, gathering just enough to fill simple clay molds. The lad scoops out the glowing liquid and your pulse quickens at the sight. Liquid metal flows like slow-moving magma, mesmerizing and mildly terrifying. You're pretty sure this wouldn't fly in a DIY-at-home video. An open scholarly debate simmers over the origins of alloy recipes. Some experts claim that Hittite metalworkers learned to mix copper and silver to create electrum shimmering in hues of gold, while others insist these alloys were purely accidental byproducts of smelting impure ore. Either way, those who mastered the blend commanded higher prestige, and coin a fact that hasn't changed much in your corner of YouTube sponsorships. The workshop's soundtrack is part ASMR metal, rasping against stone, soft murmurs of instruction, and part medieval rock concert minus the electric guitars. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the steady rhythm wash over you like a calming wave. Behind you, a pile of discarded silver stamps glints in the half-light, each once used to imprint symbols on vessels destined for distant temples. One depicts a roaring lion, another a stylized sunburst. You run a finger along the worn edge of a stamp and catch a whisper of sharp metal, like an echo of rituals yet to come. Sunlight filters through a woven canopy overhead, casting lattice shadows that dance upon the floor, an unintentional light show choreographed by breeze and time. You tilt your head trying to count the shapes, but quickly give up because counting sheep is more effective for sleep. By the workshop's edge stands a long trough of cold water used to quench red-hot ingots. The hiss and steam rising remind you of a kettle whistling in the quiet hours, an oddly soothing noise that might become your next white noise playlist track. Here you pause to appreciate the craftsmanship on display, the way each hammered bump catches light, the subtle imperfections that mark the artisan's hand. A mainstream historical fact jewelry from this period often bore protective symbols, a tree of life, a horned animal, to guard the wearer in both daily life and the afterlife. You slip back towards the anvil area, your eyelids growing heavy with the day's metal dust and contented fatigue. The last echo of the hammer's ring reverberates in your skull like a gentle gong coaxing you closer to where dreams flicker. As you step away, you feel the slight weight of a newly minted silver pin in your pocket, your reluctant souvenir. You might lose it by morning, but that's part of the charm of ancient artifacts. They belong in dusty basements, not modern junk drawers. One final quip drifts through your foggy mind. Why do metalworkers make terrible spies? Because they always leave traces behind. You smirk knowing you'll file that one under dad jokes. With a contented sigh, you take a slow breath, letting the earthy workshop smells fill your lungs. You turn your back to the glowing embers, the clangs fading into the distance, and step toward the next chapter of Silver's story, one that promises sacred rites and fermented delights. You slip through a narrow corridor, carved into the palace's limestone walls, and enter a cavernous chamber where torchlight dances across stone altars and long wooden tables. Silver flakes sparkle like stardust on the workbenches, and incense spirals upward from bronze censers, mixing with the tang of molten metal to create a heady sensory swirl. Here, priests in linen robes confer with silversmiths, their whispered chants weaving through the clang of hammer and anvil. A mainstream historical fact. Hittite temples often housed dedicated metal workshops where votive offerings, miniature weapons, ritual vessels, and deity figurines were commissioned to secure divine favor. You watch as a priest examines a half-finished silver statuette of the goddess Kubaba, inspecting every curve before nodding and handing it back to the smith for final touches. You probably won't survive this if you try to keep up with their pace. These artisans have got stamina that makes marathon runners look lazy. One smith swings his hammer with the balletic precision, sending sparks flickering like fireflies across the vaulted ceiling. His partner holds a glowing ingot with tongs, dipping it into water with a hiss that smells faintly of roasted barley. A quirky tidbit drifts through the smoky air. Some priests believe that adding tiny ground beetle shells to the furnace mix imparted a divine sheen to the silver. Historians still argue whether the iridescence came from the beetles or simply from careful polishing. You can't help but wonder what the Beatles thought of their short-lived starring role. Probably died believing they were on a heavenly reality show. One smith pauses to feed a scrap of silver into a small furnace, and you feel waves of heat on your face like standing too close to a hairdryer set on volcano. You quip internally, I came for the theology, stayed for the hot metal spa. The priests murmur incantations in a rhythm that mingles with the metalworker's ring, creating a lullaby of ritual and craft. You can almost imagine someone adding this track to a sleepy-time ASMR playlist, torch, crackle, metal ping, whispered prayers, certified to put you under in 30 seconds or less. Historians still argue whether these temple workshops were under direct royal control or operated semi-independently under priestly authority, But either way, they were hubs of both spiritual devotion and technological innovation. You lean against a sturdy column tracing its carved reliefs depictions of deities receiving offerings, their crowns alight with stylized flames. A second light joke drifts through your mind. Why did the priest bring a ladder to the temple workshop? Because he heard the offerings were on another level. Yes, it's groan-worthy. Thank you. You edge closer to a forge where a smith is engraving a silver bowl with looping cuneiform inscriptions, each character pressed into the softened metal with a steel stylus. The bowl will hold sacred ale during an upcoming harvest festival, symbolizing abundance and communal blessing. You inhale the sweet yeasty aroma and feel your eyelids grow heavier, probably from all the ceremonial fumes. Nearby, a priest offers you a ceramic cup of freshly brewed ale. You lift it to your lips and taste barley sweetness tempered by bitter herbs, just enough zing to keep you awake, but not enough to derail your bedtime. Historians still argue whether Hittite brewers used coriander or wild mint as the primary flavoring. Your tongue can't decide if you're tasting fresh mint julep or ancient supermarket shelf. You salute the priest with a nod, nearly dropping the cup in your attempt at etiquette. Nothing says, "I'm a high-status guest," like a clumsy spill. He smiles indulgently, then hands you a small silver pendant shaped like a stylized sunburst. He says it will protect you from nightmares, though you suspect it's more effective at protecting you from forgetting to tip. As the smith cools another ingot in water, the hiss and steam form a tiny cloud that drifts upward, trailing like a ghostly snake. You joke under your breath. This is the spookiest haunted house I've ever visited. The rhythmic clang of hammers continues, punctuated by the priest's low hum, a harmonious duet of faith and fabrication. You imagine a quirky scenario. What if a stray hammer fell into the incense burner? The smith would have a real burning question to answer. A third light joke drifts in. Why did the deity refuse the silver offering? Because it wanted gold. Talk about tough customers. But you stifle your laughter, mindful of the solemn atmosphere. You lean back and close your eyes for a moment, letting the overlapping sounds wash over you. The clink of tools, the priest's chant, the soft rush of drafted air through high windows. The chamber's cool stone walls absorb the clamor, then release it slowly, a resonant echo that tugs at your consciousness like a lullaby. Here, silver transforms from raw ore into sacred art, each piece carrying both the smith's skill and the priest's prayers. The atmosphere feels timeless, as though you've stepped off the chronometer of history and drifted into a realm beyond ours. You open your eyes to find the bowl, complete, inscribed, polished and gleaming under torchlight. The priest lifts it ceremonially, addressing an unseen deity. Accept this humble gift and grant our fields fertile bounty. You bow your head in solidarity, though you suspect the deity is more interested in the ale that follows. With the rite complete, the chamber falls into a hush, broken only by the dying crackle of embers and a final metallic tick as the anvil cools. You feel your heart slow, each breath drawing you toward the soft edge of sleep. You slip the sunburst pendant into your pocket. It's cold against your palm, a reminder of this sacred workshop. And so, under the watchful glow of suspended lanterns, you turn away from the temple workshop, carrying with you the echo of hammers and hymns, as you drift toward the next silver-clad chapter of Hittite rites and fermented wonders. You slip through an archway into a smaller alcove lined with wide clay vats and low ceramic basins, their surfaces etched with mesh-like patterns to strain impurities, and you probably won't survive this if you attempt to lift one without modern lifting gear. The air here feels thick, pierced by the heady aroma of smoldering charcoal and the faint, acrid tang of metal oxides. Flickering torchlight casts long shadows that dance on the curved walls, echoing the rhythmic breathing of workers bent over crucibles. A mainstream historical fact. Hittite metalworkers pioneered innovative alloys blending pure silver with electrum, a natural mix of silver and gold, and traces of copper, believed to enhance both strength and luster. You watch as molten metal pools in a crucible, glowing like molten sunrise, while a smith carefully measures copper fragments before stirring them into the silver, creating an alloy that shimmers with warm undertones. You lean in your face, warming under the radiant glow. Sparks spatter like tiny fireflies rising from the crucible, and you snatch your hand back. No one warned you about spontaneous meteor showers in an ancient workshop. Historians still argue whether these alloys were intentionally calibrated for different ceremonial uses or were accidental byproducts of smelting impure ores found in Anatolian veins. A quirky tidbit floats through the Heat local legend claims that a famed Hittite artisan named Warus once attempted to mix silver with drops of honey to achieve a more vibrant sheen. Historians still argue whether any trace of carbs survived the furnace. You can't help but picture a sugar-glazed chalice, sticky and absurd. Beside you, the smith dips a long rod into the molten blend, flicking droplets against a cold iron plate to test its malleability. Each droplet sizzles and flattens, revealing concentric ripple patterns, nature's own performance art. You lean forward, captivated by this micro-firework display, feeling the heat vibrate through your core in satisfying pulses. Engulfed in the crucible's glow, you ponder how such alloys later influenced silverwork across the Near East, carrying Hittite metallurgical secrets along ancient trade routes. You may never see an electrum-encrusted brooch in person, but your imagination glints with its imagined radiance. Don't touch, the smith warns. Though his tone is gentler than you expected, like a bedtime whisper through a steel megaphone, you nod sheepishly, backing away before you become tomorrow's archaeological exhibit. An open scholarly debate simmers over the exact copper-to-silver ratios. Some scholars claim a 3:1 ratio yielded optimal durability, while others insist a 1:1 ratio created a color closer to pure gold. Either choice designed to impress both mortal and divine onlookers. You wonder if Hittite influencers of the day flaunted their electrum baubles on social media tablets, probably with fewer filters and more chisel marks. A light joke interrupts your reverie. Why did the metal worker bring lunch to the forge? He heard it was a hot meal. The smith rolls his eyes, pounding the crucible's handle in amused exasperation. Nearby, ancient ore from diverse Anatolian hillsides converges, silver from Gultepe, copper from Alakahuyuk, each batch carrying unique mineral signatures. You imagine Hittite connoisseurs gathering for tastings not of ale, but of fine metallic notes. This batch has a hint of malachite minerality and a smooth, buttery texture. Speaking of ale, you catch a whiff of fermenting barley drifting in from the ceremonial brewroom, beyond an olfactory reminder that silver and ale entwined throughout Hittite culture. You decide to follow that scent later, but for now you linger over the glowing crucible. The smith ladles molten alloy into a shallow clay mold carved with leaf motifs. You watch the metal flood the recesses, filling every curve, until it cools into a perfect leaf-shaped applique destined for a royal headdress. You run your finger along the intricate pattern of veins etched into the mold, imagining how the final silver piece will catch sunlight at dawn, sparkling with dew-drenched brilliance. A second light joke drifts in. What did one electrum piece say to another? We make a golden team. You smirk, acknowledging your own pun prowess. As the mold cools, the smith gently taps it to release the new applique, revealing silver, gleaming against terracotta like a frost-bitten leaf. You resist the urge to eat it. It's metal, not vanilla wafer. Historians still argue whether these alloy techniques originated in Anatolia or were influenced by Mesopotamian metallurgists trading knowledge in palace forums. Regardless, the Hittite adoption of refined alloys propelled their artisans to regional dominance, their electrum wares prized as diplomatic gifts and temple tributes. You step back as the work area falls silent, the crucible's glow dimming to embers. The evening chill seeps in through an open doorway and you wrap your arms around yourself, nasal passages still tingling from metal vapors. A final quirky detail, some workshops sprinkled rare volcanic ash into alloy mixes to achieve a matte finish. though no one's sure if that was a design choice or a case of, oops, we forgot to clean the furnace. Researchers still argue over those micro-debris signatures. As you exit the forge alcove, the memory of molten metal and hushed debates lingers on your tongue like a smoky aftertaste. You inhale deeply, tasting metal dreams. Yes, that's a thing, and set your gaze on the next chapter where ale's sacred rites beckon with frothy promise. You wander into a grand hallway tucked beneath the royal palace's soaring roof beams, where display cases of polished limestone cradle pectorals and engraved seals, each glinting under the soft glow of oil lamps. The scent here is faintly sticky resin from lamp wicks mingling with the cool chill of stone, and you brush your fingertips against the edge of a glass case, resisting the urge to swipe a seal as a souvenir. A mainstream historical fact: Hittite rulers wore lavish silver pectorals, large circular breastplates adorned with animal motifs to project divine authority and military might. These insignia weighed several pounds, so you probably won't survive this if you tried wearing one to your next gym session. Behind the glass, a masterfully engraved cylinder seal rolls across a clay impression, revealing scenes of royal audiences and deity processions. The seal's intricate lines whisper of craftsmen who used fine bronze styluses to carve each detail into a cylindrical silver core. You lean closer, marveling at the seal's precision, each tiny groove carrying the weight of decrees written in cuneiform before ink and paper made things easier. A quirky tidbit surfaces: some seals bear microscopic chisel marks that form hidden messages. Historians still argue whether these cryptic Easter eggs were clever branding or accidental etchings from sleepy artisans. You squint at the clay imprint, hoping to spot a cheeky LOL hidden among the royal banquets. The hallway's hush amplifies each breath, making your chest feel like a drum you can't stop playing. A light joke floats through your mind. Why did the pectoral break up with the necklace? Because it found the relationship too shallow. You smirk, confident you won't win any awards for pun delivery tonight. You pass a silver crown band, thin yet rigid, its surface etched with alternating symbols of roaring lions and stylized sun discs. The metal feels unnaturally cool through the glass, like holding a winter night in your palm. You imagine the weight on a king's head, balancing authority and expectation in equal measure. Nearby stands a sealed clay jar containing dozens of tiny silver discs, early forms of Hittite coinage or tokens used for rationing workers. Historians still argue whether these discs served as currency or as ceremonial tokens distributed during festivals, but either way, their presence hints at an economy more sophisticated than barter alone. A second light joke drifts through. What did the silver token say at the job interview? I'm minted for this position. You crouch to inspect a large silver gong perched on a stand, though no one's sure if it served as a ceremonial instrument or simply a very fancy doorbell. You immerse yourself in the silent anticipation of a gong strike, and then realize you forgot to charge your phone. With that level of suspense, you'd expect any moment to be your ringtone's debut. A third light joke arrives. Why did the seal go to therapy? It had too many pressing issues. You chuckle softly, aware of the echo that might carry through the halls like ghostly laughter. The walls are lined with murals showing kings presenting seals to foreign envoys. Another mainstream historical fact: through these insignia, Hittite emperors formalized treaties with Babylonia and Egypt, sealing alliances that reshaped Near Eastern geopolitics. You trace a painted hand lifting a silver seal, the pigment faded but still discernible under protective varnish. You can almost hear the echo of foreign dignitaries exclaiming at the weight of the royal seal, perhaps protesting, "Could you put that down? My arm's about to fall off." A cheeky mental gag that brings a wry smile to your face. Historians still argue whether seals were primarily personal insignia or communal property kept in temple treasuries. Either way, the impression a seal left was as binding as iron chains. You picture a scribe dipping a cylinder into ink well clay here and rolling it across a message, the result a permanent signature that ghostwriters today would kill for. The corridor's lamps flicker as a breeze stirs through a grated window, and the sound of clinking metal drifts from a distant chamber, an echo of hammer strikes. Perhaps another workshop in action. You count 3 flickers but then lose count because sheep seem more reliable for bedtime math. You lean back to admire a massive silver plaque depicting a battle scene, chariots racing across stylized plains, warriors brandishing curved swords. The plaque's relief is so detailed you can read the expressions on soldiers' faces. Determination, fear, that universal. Why am I here? Look. A quirky rumor whispers that one plaque bore a tiny engraving of a mongoose chasing a rat in the background, a symbolic nod to kingship vanquishing chaos. Historians still argue whether that mongoose was real or the artisan's pet. You scratch your head, deciding rodents in royal art make surprisingly good bedtime companions. Sipping the cool air, you notice your fingertips tingling from proximity to so much silver, like metal accusing you of unfinished business. A light joke surfaces. Why don't seals ever get lost? Because they always make an impression. As you stand, a nearby guard gives you a solemn nod as if granting permission to proceed deeper into the palace's treasure trove. You tuck your imaginary cheese knife seal back into your mind's pocket and step past the cases, the corridor's length unfolding like a scroll of glittering history. The soft patter of your footsteps on flagstone blends with the distant hum of artisan chatter, a rhythmic backdrop that lulls you inward. You press your palm against a cold column, the stone surface cool and reassuring against your flushed skin. One final scholarly musing drifts. Some experts believe the tradition of royal seals influenced later iconography in Greek and Roman courts, while others contend it remained uniquely Anatolian. Regardless, the Hittite legacy stamped the world in silver. You take a deep breath, sensing the weight of imperial insignia fold around you like a cloak of ancient authority. Your eyelids flutter as the corridor's dim glow beckons you onward towards sacred brewing halls and ale-filled mysteries yet to unfold. You emerge into a twilight-drenched courtyard where broken bits of slag and discarded crucibles litter the cobblestones, glinting like fallen stars under lantern glow. Above you, the night sky stretches wide, constellations shifting slowly, as if whispering secrets about silver's celestial origins. You probably won't survive this if you try to catch a falling star stick to the ground, friend. A mainstream historical fact. Various fringe theories suggest that some Hittite silversmiths believed meteorites rained down pure silver sky metal gifted by the storm god Tarhunt himself. Historians still argue whether meteoric iron was revered similarly, but silver meteorites would have been exceedingly rare in Anatolia. You lean back against a mossy stone wall and squint upward, half expecting a glowing orb to streak across the sky. Instead, you spot the faint trail of a shooting star twice removed from Hittite altar offerings and far less useful for crafting jewelry. A quirky tidbit drifts in an oft-repeated legend claims that King Suppiluliuma once received a chunk of heaven silver as tribute, believing its celestial origin conferred divine legitimacy. Historians still argue whether any findable fragment survives or if it was pure royal PR. You rub your palm thoughtfully, imagining proclaiming on your next livestream that you too wield authentic sky metal. The courtyard's hush reminds you of midnight whispers, perfect for spinning tall tales around a campfire or a silver workshop. A light joke surfaces. Why did the star refuse to become silver? It didn't want to be meteor-ic. You smile at your own pun, gratitude creeping in for the quiet night. Nearby, a small display of iron meteorite fragments sits in a wooden box, each piece labeled in chalk with careful script. You peer inside the dark metal flecked with crystalline structures and wonder if any of those fragments once shimmered as silver under a Hittite torch. Historians still argue whether any meteoric silver influenced Bronze Age craftsmanship or remained purely mythic. You stroll past a low fountain of clear water, its basin carved from local limestone and rimmed with silver flakes washed down from periodic smelting runoffs and accidental liqueur of metal dust and groundwater. You cup your hands and taste a hint of metallic tang, probably not recommended for your hydration strategy. A second light joke emerges. What's a meteorite's favorite music? Heavy metal. You chuckle, imagining a Hittite bard strumming a crude lyre riffing on perceived celestial harmonies. Beyond the fountain, carved reliefs on a pavilion wall depict Tarhunt hurling lightning bolts and plating his chariot in gleaming silver. The artistry is so vivid you almost hear thunder echo across the night sky. A mainstream historical fact, Hittite iconography often incorporated silver accents on deities' attire, emphasizing their divine radiance. You step closer, tracing the carved outline of the storm god's cloak, each crease and fold highlighted with silver leaf long since worn away by centuries of exposure. You press a knuckle against the stone, feeling a reassuring chill that sends a gentle shiver down your spine, like Mother Nature's lullaby. An open scholarly debate simmers over whether these silver leaf techniques were developed in Anatolia independently or adopted from neighboring Syrian workshops. Either way, the resulting sheen would have dazzled worshippers stepping into the courtyard at dawn. You wander toward a low wooden bench, pluck a silver-tipped stylus from a leather pouch someone left behind and test its weight in your hand. It's finely balanced, hinting at use in detailed engraving far too delicate for writing shouty Facebook statuses. A quirky rumor flits by your mind. Some allege that silversmiths collected dew from sacred peak summits to mix with molten metal. Historians still argue whether the dew's acidity affected alloy composition or was just a poetic flourish. You sniff the air expecting mountain moisture, but catch only the faintest hint of wood smoke and star polish. You tilt your head back again, searching constellations for Orion's belt, the same stellar grouping that allegedly inspired belt buckles adorned with silver stars in later Hittite courts. A light joke drifts up. Why did the blacksmith become an astronomer? He fancied forging star maps. You bite back a grin, mindful of the silent vigil of the night. Around you, the soft tapping of a distant hammer signals a lone smith working by torchlight in an adjacent workshop. You follow the sound, footsteps echoing on flagstone, each step rocking you closer to drowsy tranquility. As you approach the forge entrance, you catch the smith silhouette bent over an anvil, sparks drifting upward like tiny meteor showers in reverse. You can almost believe they're shaping fragments of the sky itself if you squint and suspend disbelief. A third light joke surfaces. How do you know a meteorite found a job? It got accepted into the impact program. You smirk, the wordplay drifting you further toward relaxed amusement. You pause at the threshold, inhaling the combined scents of smelted metal, smoldering embers, and midnight air. The forge's warmth beckons, but you linger outside, savoring the hush of the courtyard and the promise of crafting stories from both earth and sky. One final scholarly musing drifts through your foggy mind. Some experts propose that mythic references to sky silver influenced regional trade agreements. Silver's divine origin made it credible as a status symbol among diplomatic gifts, while others argue such stories were later fabrications by scribes seeking to glorify kings. Regardless, silver's lore was as potent in shaping Hittite prestige as its physical luster. You settle onto the bench, tucking your coat around your shoulders as the chill deepens. Lantern glow pools around you, and you feel the hush of history settling in your bones, an invitation to dream beneath silent skies as celestial metal continues to sparkle through time. You step into a low-ceilinged brewhouse tucked behind palace walls, where long clay jars rest in neat rows atop stone plinths, and the air thrums with the soft gurgle of fermenting liquid. The dim torchlight dances off speckled walls coated in sticky residue, evidence of countless batches of ale distilled here for over a millennium. You probably won't survive this if you down a full amphora, so pacing is key. A mainstream historical fact: Hittite brewers as early as 1600 BCE perfected a multi-stage fermentation process using malted barley and emmer wheat, yielding a thick, cloudy ale that sustained soldiers, laborers, and priests alike. You inhale the malty sweetness mingled with earthen undertones, your senses waltzing between nourishment and mild inebriation. You sniff closer, noting a quirky fringe tidbit. Some clay jars bear painted symbols believed to invite benevolent spirits into the brew. Historians still argue whether these sigils improved flavor or simply looked ritualistically cool. You tilt your head, imagining each jar sporting a trendy label, spirit-infused Hittite IPA brewed by shamans. Behind a low wooden counter, two brew assistants lean in to decipher cuneiform notations indicating timing and ingredient ratios. One rubs a chalky smear from his fingers, nodding gravely at the other before lifting a dipper to sample the cloudy liquid. You follow suit, and the ale's silky warmth rolls across your tongue, an undertow of toasted grain laced with faint herbaceous notes. Believe it or not, one assistant murmurs some recipes added juniper berries or coriander seeds to ward off stomach ailments. Historians still argue whether hops ever featured, but early brews likely relied on wild herbs for bitterness and preservation. You wonder if coriander-spiced ale pairs well with modern pizza, certainly worth testing. A light joke bubbles up. Why did the barley get invited to every feast? Because it knew how to malt the guests. You grin, feeling a warm buzz that could lull even the most restless soul. The brewhouse's soundtrack is soft liquid sloshing wooden staves, creaking distant murmurs of ritual chants wafting through open doorways. You imagine adding this to a Sleepytime Brewery ASMR playlist. Fermentation fizz, hushed whispers, and the gentle scrape of clay on stone. You wander down aisles of jars, each one stained with darker rings where ale once reached the brim. Some vessels are sealed with chunks of dough, others with palm frond thatch, creating a mosaic of textures. A mainstream historical fact: Hittites sometimes used dough seals inscribed with royal emblems to guarantee authenticity and quality control. You press a finger against the crusted seal, half expecting a spray of ale to reward your curiosity. Nearby, a small side chamber houses wooden mash tuns, where grains steep in water heated by embers underneath. The rich steam rises in lazy coils, carrying scents that remind you of hot cereal simmering in your own kitchen, comforting, familiar, yet tinged with ancient mystery. You breathe deeply, savoring the aroma as eyelids hover on the brink of closure. A quirky detail drifts by: one experimental batch reportedly included pomegranate rind for color and acidity. Historians still argue whether that brew was a hit or a royal faux pas. You can't decide if tangy fruit ale would compete with barley's sweetness, but you'd pay good drachma to find out. You find a low wooden stool by a narrow window looking onto courtyard lanterns. You perch on it and watch silvery motes float in torchlight, like airborne treasure in miniature. A second light joke surfaces. What do you call a brewery that never sleeps? Insomnia stout. You let out a soft chuckle, the sound echoing like a lullaby in the hushed space. Next to you, a carved stone basin holds grain soaking in fragrant herbal infusions, mint, thyme, and something mysterious you can't quite place. You dip a finger in the cloudy water and taste a hint of bitterness, grounding you in the moment, as the rhythmic drip-drip of a wooden ladle distracts you toward drowsiness. The lead brewer, an elder with silver-streaked hair, lifts her gaze and smiles. She explains that brewing rites often accompanied silver offerings after consecrating a new cup, or bowl rituals concluded with communal toasts of freshly brewed ale, sealing bonds between mortals and gods. Historians still argue whether those toasts involve competitive chugging contests, probably regulated to prevent diplomatic incidents. You lift your dregs-filled cup in salute, murmuring, "Layla's luck," the brewing house's local saying, and feel the warmth settle like a gentle blanket across your chest. The assistant smiles and pours a modest refill, mindful of your delicate constitutions. A third light joke drifts in. Why did the ale go to school to become a brewologist? You smirk, acknowledging that even your worst puns shine brighter than electrum alloy. The brewhouse's ambient glow softens as oil lamps gutter, casting elongated shadows that sway like dancers performing the world's slowest waltz. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sensory mosaic liquid warmth murmured chants herbaceous steam wash through you. An open scholarly debate arises. Some researchers claim that Hittite breweries mimicked Sumerian designs, while others insist innovations emerged independently from local Anatolian traditions. Either way, these fermentation halls fostered communal unity, banishing hunger, and inspiring shared tales beneath vaulted ceilings. You shift on your stool, the wood creaking, and notice a silver strainer perched nearby, engraved with looping motifs of barley stalks and crescent moons, a symbol linking harvest cycles to lunar calendars. You turn it over in your hands, marveling at the delicate craftsmanship applied to a simple tool. As your senses swirl, the brewhouse's distant echoes, footsteps ricochet of ladles, low laughter blend into a soothing soundscape. You let your head roll back, the circular cup of ale resting on your palm, tempting you toward dream's doorstep. One final quip flits through your mind. If you catch someone stealing ale, does that make them a malt burglar? You smile, the ridiculousness nudging your thoughts toward fluffy clouds. With the elder's gentle nod, you place the cup on a stone ledge and stand, the room's warmth reluctantly releasing you. You brush stray barley husks from your robes, inhale a final breath of grain-scented air, and step into the night corridor where silver reinvents itself in new forms and where your journey continues toward ceremonial toasts under sacred sky. You step into a vaulted hall laid with polished stone floors and lined with low benches where silver cups and ornate drinking horns rest on cloth-draped tables, each vessel waiting to fulfill its ceremonial destiny. The hall's high-arched ceiling echoes with hushed preparations. Helpers arranging horned rhytons, priests whispering last-minute invocations, and the faint tinkle of silver spoons. You probably won't survive this if you knock one over. Clattering silver calls down palace wrath faster than you can say oops. A mainstream historical fact. Hittite ceremonial ale tasting rites involved multiple courses, often beginning with small sips of pure barley brew and progressing to spiced mixes in elaborately engraved silver cups. You watch as a priest, garbed in flowing linen and beaded collars, places a cup before each noble, his eyes solemn beneath braided hair. The first horned rhyton. A long drinking vessel fashioned from silver and shaped like a bull's head gleams under torchlight. The priest fills it with ale, the frothy liquid rising to the brim before settling into a creamy foam. You lean in, inhaling the earthy aroma laced with notes of thyme and juniper, a combination believed to honor the storm god Tarhunt. Historians still argue whether only barley-based ale qualified as sacred, or if concoctions with added herbs were acceptable for the initial toast. A quirky tidbit drifts through the chanting. Fringe scholars claim that after the first toast, minor cupbearers performed acrobatic dances around the tables to encourage divine favor. Historians still argue whether this was a formal troupe or an impromptu display by overzealous servants. You imagine balancing a horned cup on your head while tangoing for the gods and promptly decide to stick to the drinking part. As the priest raises his cup, the chamber falls silent. You join the courtiers in lifting your own silver vessel, the weight cool and reassuring in your hand. The first sip is deliberate and small, an almost medicinal taste of barley warmth and herbal tang, the foam leaving a gentle tickle on your lips. You suppress a smile at the thought of modern craft brewers coveting this exact flavor profile. Hittite ale, now on tap at your local gastropub. A light joke surfaces. Why did the Rhyton get invited to court? Because it had horns of plenty. You grin, mindful that the cup itself might judge your humor as harshly as the assembly does your toasting etiquette. The second course arrives in smaller silver cups, round-bodied chalices engraved with sun disk motifs. These cups hold ale infused with pomegranate rind and pine resin, adding tartness and piney warmth to the brew. You swirl the liquid, watching the light catch crimson flecks dancing in the murk. Historians still argue whether pomegranate was prized for taste, color, or symbolic blood-red tribute. You take a cautious sip and feel a burst of tart fruit balanced by resin's subtle bitterness. It's bracing like a woodland breeze in liquid form, warm, foresty, and just complex enough to spark thoughtful nods around in the hall. You mentally applaud the Hittite brewer's boldness and note to yourself that your next sleepy ASMR session might include forest ambiance and metal clinks. A second light joke drifts in. What's a court's favorite branching drink? Twiggy ale. You suppress a snort, picturing corporate execs pitching Twiggy ale to investors. During the third toast, a horned rhyton carved in the shape of a griffin emerges. Silver wings spread along its shaft, and the open beak pours ale in a smooth ribbon. This brew is mixed with honey and wild mint, creating a sweet and cool fusion said to ease tensions and inspire poetic visions. Historians still argue whether honey was an everyday additive or reserved for royal palates only. You lift the griffin rhyton, its ornate handle pressing against your palm in an oddly comforting way. You tip it back and let the mint honey ale roll over your tongue. Sweet warmth followed by a minty freshness that makes your head feel lighter, like drifting atop a cloud of sugared ivy. You imagine scribes later writing epic verses under honeyed inspiration, ode to the ale rhyton perhaps. A third light joke drifts through. Why did the honey ale blush? Because it saw the bees in the cup. You grin, feeling the mint and honey tingle extend into a gentle hum in your chest. Between toasts, the priests chant soft blessings, each syllable weaving through the clink of cups and murmured responses from courtiers. The hall's acoustics carry the ritual sounds like a gentle wave washing over you, and coaxing eyelids heavy with fermented dreams. You notice a carved silver cup tipped slightly, the residual ale catching torchlight in a shallow pool. The design depicts a bull trampling grapes, a curious juxtaposition of strength and fruit, reflecting dual aspects of harvest grain and vine. Historians still argue whether vineyards played a role in Hittite agriculture, or if such imagery was purely symbolic borrowing from neighboring cultures. Your gaze drifts to a nearby basin of small silver ladles used for sampling ale. Each ladle's handle shaped into twisting vines and tiny animal figures. You pick one up, its weight surprisingly light for its size, and trace the vine spirals with your thumb, feeling each loop's gentle ridge. It's absurdly calming, like fidgeting with a metallic worry bead. A final quirky detail floats by. Some nobles prize the slight foam residue stuck to the cup rim as evidence of a skilled pour. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine taste test or just aristocratic snobbery. You run your finger along the rim, hoping to catch a whisper of fermented foam. As the final toast concludes, a hush falls. The priest raises his voice in a closing invocation. You tip your cup to the assembled gods, Tarhunt Hebat, and lesser deities. Your voice joining the chorus in a low murmur. The combined resonance of metal and prayer rings in your chest like a gentle gong. You set your cup on a silver tray carried by an attendant. The warmth lingers in your palm, a comforting echo of the brews you tasted. The hall's lanterns flicker as the chamber returns to quiet, the ceremony's clatter now replaced by muted footsteps and labored exhales. You step back toward the entrance, the weight of silver vessels at your side, and the hum of ritual still thrumming in your ears. Your head swims with herbal notes and metallic coolness, a sensory dance coaxing you closer to slumber. One last light joke drifts through your half-aware mind. If gods get hangovers, do they call it divine retribution? You smirk, letting the thought sink into your dreams. As you exit the ceremonial hall, the corridor's torches guide you forward into softer chambers where memory of silver rites and ale's sacred rites mingle like stirred stores of sleep. You pause in a low-lit alcove adjacent to the ceremonial hall and inhale deeply, allowing the full symphony of flavors from hours of ale tasting to wash over you. Malt sweetness, herbaceous whispers, and lingering toasted barley that clings to your palate like a stubborn dream. You probably won't survive this if you try to swallow it all at once. So savor each nuance as though it were a fleeting star in the night sky. A mainstream historical fact. Hittite ale was typically unfiltered, leaving suspended barley husks and yeast sediments that created a thick porridge-like consistency, so much so that many drinkers scooped rather than sipped. You lift a small silver ladle and draw up a cloudy drop, its weight tangible in the hollow of the spoon. Your tongue meets a caress of roasted grain, followed by a bright spark of coriander or juniper. Historians still argue whether coriander or pine resin offered the primary bittering agent in Hittite brews. The bitterness doesn't bite, but teases like a mischievous imp tugging at your taste buds. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some connoisseurs insisted that ale aged in silver-lined vats developed a slight metallic undertone. Historians still argue whether trace silver ions actually leached into the brew or if it was collective imagination fueled by ceremonial hype. You tilt the ladle, watching droplets cling to the metal curve as though eager to leave a silvery residue behind. The ale's aroma dances upward, a layered bouquet of sweet barley damp earth from malt kilns and the faintest hint of honeyed wildflowers. You close your eyes to better focus, picturing fields of gold stalks swaying in a morning breeze. A light joke drifts through your mind. Why did the barley blush? Because it saw the malt in its natural state? You grin at your own pun, tasting that sweetness on your lips. Then comes the warmth, a gentle spreading heat that radiates through your chest, settling like a soft ember in your core. You can almost feel each molecule of alcohol pirouetting across your tongue, each one whispering ancient secrets. You probably won't survive this if you let it overwhelm you, but at this pace you'll drift blissfully toward dreams. A second light joke surfaces. What's an ale's favorite dance? The barley go-round. You chuckle, imagining a tavern filled with tipsy revelers spinning in perpetual circles. Between sips, you focus on texture, the slight grittiness of husk particles brushing your gums before dissolving into a smooth silkiness. It's like running your fingers over sandpaper that suddenly morphs into satin. You wonder if any modern microbrewery has dared to replicate that tactile surprise, and if so, whether they'd survive the Yelp reviews. You lean against a stone balustrade etched with silver leaf, the cold surface grounding you as flavors swirl. A quirky rumor tickles your thoughts. Allegedly, some brewers added fragments of crushed gemstone, trace amethyst, or quartz to clarify the brew, believing that these minerals purified the ale. Historians still argue whether any gem shards were ever found in fermentation residues, or if this was poetic marketing. You touch the carved silver veins, half expecting a sparkle of crystal to appear. The alcove's torchlight flickers over a silver-rimmed bowl filled with taste-testing ladles. Each ladle bears a different handle design, one a curled serpent, another a stylized moon, reminding you that even utensils carried symbolic weight. You lift the serpent-handled spoon, tracing its sinuous curve with your thumb, as though soothing a mythical pet. A third light joke drifts by. Why did the ale refuse to fight? It wanted to keep things brew-tyful. You groan and mentally file that one under late-night puns. You inhale once more, catching now the subtlest note of fermentation. Green apple tang mingling with barley's depth, an echo of wild yeast dancing on the edge of fermentation's finale. A mainstream historical fact: residues of Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast have been identified in pottery shards from Hittite sites, confirming their use of cultivated strains rather than purely wild yeasts. The flavors coalesce, a layered tapestry of sweet, sour, bitter, and umami-like savoriness that defies easy description. It's a sensory journey across flavor realms, each sip a chapter in an unfolding epic. You close your eyes, letting the experience blur past the confines of conscious thought until all that remains is a warm glow and an expanding euphoria. An open scholarly debate simmers. Some experts argue that Hittite breweries employed temperature-controlled fermentation rooms to achieve consistent flavor, while others insist such methods emerged only in later cultures. You shiver in anticipation if true. These ancient fermenters were early pioneers of microbrew temperature control, centuries ahead of your basement homebrew setup. You reach out to touch the cool silver rim of the bowl, feeling its reassuring solidity as the ale's warmth recedes into a lingering afterglow. A delicate metallic tingle on your tongue hints at micro amounts of silver or copper, if real a souvenir of centuries-old vessels that lived up to their legendary status. A final light joke drifts to the surface. What did the ale say to the reluctant guest? "Don't worry, I'll barely notice." You smile softly, letting the pun settle like foam atop a mug. You set the ladle back and let your head rest against the cool stone, the alcove's hush cocooning you in a tender embrace of flavor and memory. Your eyelids slide shut as the layered sensory echoes of fermented barley and metal weave threads of slumber around you. You slip into a niche off the main corridor where rows of gleaming silver cups and elegantly curved drinking horns rest upon plush velvet cushions, their polished surfaces reflecting soft lantern light like liquid mirrors. You probably won't survive this. If you cradle more than one horn at a time, you'd look like an ancient juggler auditioning for your own downfall. A mainstream historical fact. Hittite artisans crafted drinking vessels in a variety of shapes, some simple, others lavishly embossed using silver hammered into thin sheets and then soldered into seamless cups. You reach out and lift a small silver beaker, its rim cool against your fingertips, and notice the barely perceptible hammer marks that betray the smith's careful labor. Beside the beakers, a collection of animal-headed rhytons drinking horns fashioned from silver and bone wait in silent readiness. One resembles a snarling lion, its mane formed from delicate repoussé work, while another mimics a graceful gazelle horns curving skyward. You probably won't survive the concentration needed to appreciate every embossed whisker, but you try anyway. A quirky tidbit drifts through the hushed display. Some horns incorporate tiny hidden chambers in their bases thought by fringe theorists to filter sediment. Historians still argue whether those chambers were practical strainers or purely decorative secrets. You peer into a gazelle horn's narrow spout, half expecting to find a hidden sieve and find only polished silver reflecting your own drowsy face. You lift the lion right in its weight, deceptively balanced, and tip it gently. The empty vessel sings a soft metallic hum, akin to a distant bell resonating in your chest. You imagine a chorus of horns raised in unison, the combined resonance crafting a symphony to honor royal guests. A second light joke surfaces. Why did the lion horn refuse to roar? Because it preferred a gentle pour. Engage with one of the larger cups, its bowl engraved with a ring of miniature sun discs, alternating with stylized mountain peaks, a symbolic nod to heavenly authority over earthly realms. You swirl your finger inside the cup's interior, tracing the engraved horizon line and feeling each tiny groove slide beneath your skin. The sensation is oddly mesmerizing, like running your hand over rippled sand under moonlight. A third light joke drifts in. What do you call a drinking horn that tells jokes, a puncho? You suppress a groan, mindful that echoing laughter might disturb palace guards on their evening rounds. Historians still argue whether these horns were purely ceremonial or also used at informal feasts, but archaeological deposits reveal both pristine examples in tombs and heavily worn horns in communal halls, suggesting use across contexts. You can almost picture a rowdy banquet where nobles slam horns on tables in boisterous celebration. Definitely not a bedtime-appropriate scenario, but your imagination wanders freely. You set the rhyton down on its velvet stand and move to a pedestal showcasing a grand silver chalice, tall, slender, with a twisted stem resembling intertwined vines. Its base is wide enough to cradle in both hands the metal cool as marble. A fringe theory posits that vines symbolize the cycle of life and death. Historians still argue whether the imagery references local flora or is borrowed from distant Levantine motifs. You lift the chalice, inhaling the faintest metallic aroma, and imagine it filled with the Hittite Empire's finest ale. Its weight a prelude to the sensory voyage within. A light joke emerges. Why did the chalice refuse to gossip? Because it preferred to keep things under wraps. You smirk, imagining royal courtiers whispering secrets into polished silver. As you place the chalice back, you notice minute repairs along its rim. Tiny silver rivets smoothing over cracks, evidence of care and reuse rather than disposal. A mainstream historical fact, precious vessels were often repaired and remelted rather than replaced, reflecting the high value of silver and the skill required to work it. You reach for a small, shallow bowl edged in silver filigree. Its center, a mosaic of tiny silver granules fused to the base, creating a textured star map pattern. Scholars remain divided. Some say this pattern held astronomical significance, while others believe it was purely decorative. You trace the granules with a fingertip, each tiny bead cool and inviting, like unique constellations trapped in metal. A second light joke floats up. How do you organize a party in a silver cup, you metal plan? You chuckle quietly, the pun echoing like a soft drum beat in the silent room. Nearby, a horn-shaped flask stands, its slender neck inlaid with strips of blue-glazed faience, an exotic contrast to the silver. You probably won't survive the sensory overload of mixing materials in one vessel, but you admire the craftsmanship. The faience gleams like a pool of twilight sky, suggesting Hittite trade connections with Egyptian and Syrian artisans. You lift the flask and find a tiny inscription at its base, a cuneiform dedication reading, "To Hebat, giver of life." You whisper the goddess's name and feel a gentle shiver at the thought of ancient worshippers pledging their devotion in silver's embrace. Historians still argue whether such dedications were personal tokens or communal offerings, but the inscription's intimacy resonates across millennia. You place the flask down and stand amid the treasures, the soft glow of lanterns pooling around you like liquid gold. The hush here feels sacred, each vessel a silent testament to craftsmanship, devotion, and social ritual. You inhale the mixed scents of metal and lingering incense from the ceremonial hall, a sensory whisper of the night's earlier rites. One final light joke drifts in. Why did the drinking horn break up with the cup? Because it found the relationship too poor, formally restrictive. You grin, letting the silliness settle as a gentle bubble before sleep. As you ease away from the display, the soft tap of your boots on stone echoes like a heartbeat, guiding you toward the next chapter, where the Hittite Silk Road of silver exchange awaits, carrying these artifacts across deserts and mountain passes into history's unfolding tapestry. You find yourself standing before a weathered caravan milestone, etched into sandstone, its faded cuneiforms barely legible beneath centuries of wind-blown dust. You probably won't survive this if you try to read every inscription. Ancient road markers don't come with footnotes. Yet you squat to trace the worn grooves, imagining Hittite traders guiding ox-drawn wagons laden with silver ingots and earthen jars of ale along dusty routes stretching from Anatolia to the Aegean. A mainstream historical fact. The Hittites maintained extensive caravan networks, overland routes, linking major urban centers like Hattusa, Carchemish, and Ugarit, facilitating the movement of luxury goods such as silverwork and ceremonial brews. You glance down at a rough map scratched into your mind's eye, plotting dusty tracks that wind through sun-scorched plains and cross-towering mountain passes. Beside the milestone, a small bronze bowl holds handfuls of crushed resin used as caravan incense to mask the stench of livestock and ale. You sniff a fragment, catching resin's sweet pine aroma mixed with grainy barley undertones, because nothing says adventure like fortified aromatics. Historians still argue whether traders or priests organized these expeditions, citing temple archives that alternately record commercial decrees and ritual blessings for safe passage. A quirky tidbit drifts through the desert wind. Fringe sources tell of mobile brew shrines mounted on pack mules, portable chapels where passing caravans pause to pour libations from silver cups to appease road deities. Historians still argue whether these shrines were widespread practices or romantic inventions by travel-weary scribes longing for home-brewed comforts. You can't help but picture a mule wearing a tiny silver chalice strapped to its back, adorable and slightly absurd. You rise and dust off your robes, feeling the weight of invisible silver goods pressing lightly against your back. Ahead, the route forks. One path heads north toward the Taurus foothills, the other veers west into misty coastal highlands rumored to trade Hittite silver for Cretan olive oil. You probably won't survive a question like which way without throwing a coin, but silver coins weren't in use yet, so you opt for the northerly winds instead. A light joke surfaces. Why did the caravan avoid the shortcut? Because they weren't into foam and fortune, the foam being ale and the fortune being silver. You snort softly, pleased you can still conjure puns at this hour. As you follow the worn wheel ruts, you pass a line of weathered stele inscribed with royal decrees, guaranteeing safe conduct for traders, a form of ancient travel insurance. One decree reads, "No toll shall be levied upon caravans bearing tribute to the great king." You tap the stela, half expecting to see a villainous tax collector materialize. Too bad they're long gone. A second light joke drifts in. What's a Hittite trader's favorite card game? Silver slabs. It's like blackjack, but with actual silver pieces. You chuckle, the sound echoing against distant hills like a lonely traveler's grin. You reach a shaded watering hole fringed by tamarisk trees. The water flows cool and clear, tinted faintly gray by silver flakes washed downhill from nearby smelting sites. You cup your hands and take a sip, the mineral taste reminding you of early mornings in Anatolian workshops. A fringe theory suggests that caravans collected this metallic water to baptize new silver vessels before use. Historians still argue whether any purification effect occurred or if this was simply superstition. Nearby, carved into a boulder, you discover a pictogram of a laden camel and a stylized torch, likely marking a rest station offering fresh ale and direction signs. You probably won't survive a wild guess, but decide it meant refreshing brew ahead. You lean back against the boulder, tasting resin and barley on your tongue as the desert's hush presses gently around you. An open scholarly debate arises. Some scholars claim that Hittite trade routes predated royal roads evolving from nomadic pathways, while others insist state-sponsored imperial projects formalize them. Either way, the roads bore the footprints of countless merchants, priests, and dreamers, all seeking the shine of silver or the comfort of a well-brewed ale. You rise, brushing stray pebbles from your knees, and continue along the sunlit track. Soon you spy a group of foreign traders approaching from the west. Syrians draped in dyed wool cloaks, Cretans salted by sea breezes, and even a lone Minoan whose hair glints like tangled gold. They carry exotic wares, glass beads, purple dye, and of course, jars of olive oil. In exchange, they seek Hittite silver ornaments and specialized brewing cups. You probably won't survive the ensuing negotiations without a translation app, so you stick to gestural diplomacy, thumbs up for ale, coin chunk gesture for silver. A third light joke drifts to mind. Why did the trader bring folding furniture for table negotiations? You stifle a giggle as you mime unfolding a crate between you and the foreigners, offering a clay cup for toasting. The group shares a communal drink, passing around a silver-rimmed cup filled with a thick amber brew, likely spiced with coriander and pomegranate rind. You join, tasting a fusion of cultures in one sip, Anatolian barley, Syrian spice, and sea salt from distant shores. The blend is surprising yet harmonious, a reminder that trade routes were more than economic corridors. They were bridges of culture and taste. As you hand back the cup, the traders exchange gentle blessings for safe journey. May your horizon be clear and your vessels never leak. You reply in kind, though your phrases are a patchwork of broken Hittite and mumbled compliments. They smile warmly, the universal language of goodwill transcending words. You take one last look down the road where wheel tracks disappear over a sunlit ridge. Somewhere beyond lies the next silver foray, palaces sparkling with refined artifacts, ale halls humming with ritual chants, and workshops echoing with hammer strikes. You pocket the memory of this caravan exchange, its silver-laced friendship etched into your spirit. With a deep breath, you rise and resume the journey. Footsteps echoing lightly, carrying tales of silver and ale across ancient landscapes and guiding you toward the next chapter's unfolding secrets. You step into a shadowed pavilion overlooking a rippling river where silver-laden barges once drifted lazily downstream, their hulls glinting in the midday sun like waterborne stars. And you probably won't survive this if you try to walk on water without a bailout plan. The stone floor beneath your feet bears faint grooves carved by centuries of cargo wheels, and the murmur of the river's flow whispers tales of endless trade. A mainstream historical fact: Hittite traders utilized riverine routes along the Kizil Irmak and other waterways to transport heavy silver ingots and fragile ale jars, dramatically reducing overland hazards. You peer over a low balustrade to imagine leather-strapped horses waiting thigh-deep, crews guiding poles beneath barges, each journey punctuated by creaks and sloshes under the sun's glare. A quirky tidbit drifts on the breeze. Fringe accounts claim that some river captains decorated their barges' prows with silver filigree sculptures of fish and waterfowl. Historians still argue whether these were practical talismans against sinking or mere displays of ostentation. You duck under an archway carved with intertwined dolphins clutching silver rings in their jaws, feeling the cool stone against your brow. The pavilion's air is thick with river mist and the faint scent of fermented grain left over from onboard tasting fests, because who says you can't sample ale while navigating currents? You inhale deeply, the mingled aromas coaxing a sleepy grin onto your face. A light joke bubbles up. Why did the barge bring an umbrella in case of liquid asset storms? Beneath your feet lies an inlaid silver mosaic depicting barges laden with goods, jars of ale, amphorae of oil, and stacks of silver ingots, emblazoned with royal seals. Each tile catches flickers of torchlight illuminating scenes of bustling river ports. Hattus's docks, Samal's quay, and distant Ugoret's harbor. Historians still argue whether Hittites built permanent docks or relied on seasonal wooden scaffolds, but the mosaic's detail suggests a well-developed infrastructure. You trace the path of a tiny silver grain barge carved into the mosaic, its crew depicted as stylized stick figures, yet you sense the urgency in their posture, shoulders hunched under invisible weight. A second light joke surfaces. What's a river's favorite metal? Silver, because it always levels itself. From a niche alcove, you retrieve a small silver whistle hung on a leather thong. Once the captain's signal device for tow crews to stop or shift direction. You bring it to your lips and give a tentative blow. The whistle emits a faint squeaky note, more comedic than commanding. You chuckle and tuck it back, marveling at how such a simple tool once directed dozens of laborers across unpredictable currents. An open scholarly debate ripples through your mind. Some experts argue that Hittite river transport predated evidence of large-scale caravan routes, while others insist waterways complemented rather than spearheaded trade networks. Regardless, the interplay of water and road remains a hallmark of Hittite logistical genius. You lean against a carved pillar etched with waves and lotus motifs, symbols usually reserved for distant Egyptian influences. Historians still argue whether this decoration was imported by elite travelers or locally adopted from passing merchants. You lightly tap the lotus petals in relief, each petal's edge worn smooth by centuries of hands seeking blessings for safe passage. Overhead woven mats screen the pavilion from direct sunlight, the slats casting lattice shadows that drift like lazy serpents across the floor. A third light joke flits through. Why don't barges ever get lost? They always follow the current events. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the hush of water and shadow lull your senses. The distant call of a nightbird echoes faintly, layering the scene with natural ASMR water lap bird call, soft breeze and reeds, a lullaby of riverine calm that beckons eyelids to flutter shut. Suddenly, a low murmur of conversation drifts toward you, shadowy silhouettes of merchants inspecting their silver by torchlight, weighing ingots on portable scales balanced against suspended lead weights. You peer into the dim corridor, lanterns dangle from iron hooks, casting pools of amber glow on tables strewn with cuneiform tablets detailing transactions. A mainstream historical fact, silver ingots bore standardized weights and sometimes bore the impressions of official stamps to prevent fraud, ensuring merchants could trust the metal's value across distant markets. You wander forward, picking up a small tablet listing 12 ingots to Ugarit. 15 jars of ale for palace store. The scribe's hand is neat and precise, though some characters blur where oil splatters struck the clay. You can almost taste the cinnamon-spiced ale note left on the tablet's surface, if only clay could hold flavor alongside ink. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some traders mixed ingredients of ale with paint to create durable pigments using leftover brew sludge to color murals. Historians still argue whether those ancient frescoes owe their hues to barley byproducts or enduring mineral dyes. You set the tablet back, mindful of smudging precious records, and crouch beside a low fountain carving its water laced with silver dust. Small fish, courtesy of later settlement, dart through the ripples, tiny scales glinting as they swim between flecks of metal. You fish out a sliver of silver leaf that drifted in on the current, gently pressing it between your fingers before letting it float away like bidding goodbye to a fragment of the past. A final light joke drifts in. Why was the river so generous? It always gave streams of silver to its banks. You grin at the pun, the water's sighing breath, soothing you deeper toward drowsiness. Rising, you turn back toward the pavilion's exit, where a lantern-lit corridor leads to further chambers of silver lore. Your footsteps echo softly, carrying you onward as the pavilion's mosaic shimmers behind you. The scent of river mist mingles with ancient alloy, weaving a calming tapestry of earth, water, and crafted metal that guides you toward the next chapter's unfolding twilight. You slip through an ornate doorway into a hidden workshop tucked behind palace kitchens, where the warm glow of a brazier illumines rows of small clay pots brimming with bubbling resin and powdered pigments, materials used to decorate silver and ale vessels alike. You probably won't survive this if you try mixing molten metal and pigment without protective gear, so savor the spectacle from a safe distance. A mainstream historical fact. Hittite artisans applied silver leaf to ceramics and wooden items using organic adhesives like animal glue or honey, creating vessels that gleamed like polished metal. You lean over a low bench where a young apprentice presses a slender brush into soft adhesive before daubing meticulous lines of silver leaf onto a clay ale cup. The air here hums with rich aromas, sweet resin mingling with the tang of heated metal and the smoky perfume of burnt stone. A warm breeze drifts through an open window, carrying distant laughter from the brewhouse. You close your eyes and inhale deeply, letting the mingled scents wrap around you like a comforting cloak before drifting toward slumber. An open scholarly debate simmers over whether silver leaf techniques were learned from Egyptian craftsmen via Syrian intermediaries or independently developed in Anatolia. Either way, the resulting vessels shimmer with cross-cultural brilliance. You trace the apprentice's smooth strokes, imagining the final cup shimmering under torchlight during a royal feast. A quirky tidbit drifts on the warm air. Fringe accounts claim some artisans mix tiny ground gemstones, lapis lazuli, or malachite into their adhesives to tint the silver leaf, producing iridescent hues that rivaled moonlight. Historians still argue whether those colored alloys ever truly existed or were mythical embellishments by traveling storytellers. You peer at a pot of pale blue resin caught between suspicion and wonder. Nearby, a master metalworker shapes ornate handle fittings for silver cups, bending and twisting filigree wires into looping knots resembling braided hair. You probably won't survive attempting such delicate work without years of practice, so you sip the moment, like fine ale, letting it settle on your consciousness. A light joke surfaces. Why did the artisan use silver leaf on his notebook? Because he wanted sparkling ideas. You grin, imagining sparkles dancing across parchment in the candlelight, then stifle a giggle, lest echoes betray your wakefulness. Across the room, a smith hammers a thin sheet of silver to create a decorative band for ale horns. Each hammer strike rings like a distant bell, its resonance softening into a rhythmic lullaby. You rest your palm against a cool silver panel and feel tiny vibrations travel up your arm, a gentle reminder of the craft's tactile intimacy. A second light. Joke drifts in. What did the silver sash say to the ale horn? We're a perfect match? Cheers to that. You shake your head at your own pun, the silly humor easing you toward gentle yawns. On a wooden rack, dozens of newly gilded cups and plates dry. Under warm embers, their surfaces mottled with patches of adhesive that will be polished away later. A mainstream historical fact. These items often bore stamped motifs, trees, bulls, or solar discs applied after leafing to reinforce imagery and protect delicate edges. You flex your fingers, imagining the apprentice's careful brushwork. Tiny strokes no wider than a hair strand, each one contributing to vessels fit for gods and kings. The idea of controlling so many microscopic pieces of metal makes your heart race with admiration and mild terror. A third light joke surfaces. Why was the gilded cup always calm? Because it knew how to keep its leaf together. You let out a soft snort, surprised your own corny joke doesn't wake the others. You pivot to a dark corner where a low hearth crackles under a special furnace used for fire gilding, applying a mercury-silver amalgam and gently heating to vaporize mercury, leaving pure silver fused to base metal. Historians still argue whether Hittite workshops practiced fire gilding or cultivated simpler leaf techniques exclusively, but the ritualized heat of the hearth carries an incantatory quality regardless. The smith ladles a shimmering amalgam onto a bronze chalice, then waves a torch flame in slow concentric circles. A fine mist of vapor rises in a ghostly plume, drifting toward the ceiling before dispersing. You cough lightly at the acrid air, definitely not spa-grade, and wave your hand to clear the fumes, marveling at the chalice's rapidly brightening surface. A quirky detail floats past. Some accounts claim artisans whispered poetic blessings lines of cuneiform poetry over fire-gilded items, believing this invoked protective spirits that anchored silver leaf to the vessel. Historians still argue whether any of those blessings were ever inscribed or simply part of an oral tradition now lost to time. You lean closer to the chalice, half expecting tiny runes to shimmer into view. The brazier's heat radiates warmth that seeps into your bones, coaxing a gentle drowsiness. You notice the rhythmic hiss of the fire, the soft crackle of burning fuel, and the occasional drip as molten amalgam falls back into the hearth, an auditory tapestry tailor-made for sleep. You rise to move toward a display of finished works, gleaming silver cups stamped with royal seals, each one radiating a cool metallic hush. The contrast between the furnace's fervent heat and these silent artifacts feels like the heartbeat of creation followed by the sigh of completion. An open scholarly debate flickers in your mind. Some experts argue that the Hittite mastery of gilding techniques influenced later Greek metalwork, while others maintain the tradition remained localized and independent. Either way, these gilded treasures bridge the gap between mundane and divine in silver's alchemy. You pick up a small votive cup shaped like a stylized lotus bud. Its silver surface is soft to the touch, with delicate petal edges folded inward. You bring it close and inhale a faint trace of putrid mercury lingers, reminding you how thin the veil is between beauty and danger. You tuck the cup back onto its velvet cushion, heart pounding with reverence and relief that you're not a palace smith. A final light joke drifts through your sleepy mind. Why did the silver cup refuse to speak because it was too well-rounded to gossip? You smile, the pun settling like frothy foam on a quiet brew. As you step away from the gilding workshop, the echoes of hammer hiss and brushstroke fade behind you, replaced by corridor whispers promising hidden treasuries and final twilight visions. You feel the pull of dreams as your senses swirl with metal sheen, smoky heat, and honeyed adhesives, sensory threads weaving a silver tapestry in your slumber-bound mind. You are crouched in a twilight-lit lab, perched just beyond the palace storeroom, where shattered shards of silver cups lie arrayed on stone benches like scattered stars, awaiting rediscovery, and you probably won't survive this if you try sniffing broken metal hoping for ale fumes. Instead, you don a linen glove, lean over a delicate tool, and coax a tiny fleck of residue from an engraved writing into a glass vial. A mainstream historical fact. Modern analysis of pottery and metal drinking vessels from Hittite sites has detected residues of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the same yeast species used in many contemporary beers, confirming that ancient brews relied on cultivated strains rather than unpredictable wild ferments. You stare at the crystal-clear vial, mind racing at the thought that this crumb of yeast might be a living link to a 500-year-old brew. The lab's oil lamp flickers, casting your shadow long across ceramic jars of reagent and carved bone spatulas. The atmosphere feels part scientific study, part seance, calling forth whispers of frothy rituals long since silenced. A quirky tidbit drifts in as you pipette a drop of distilled water into a microscope slide fringe. Researchers once claimed that tiny golden flecks embedded in the yeast pellets might reflect microsilver particles leached from cups, subtly altering fermentation flavors. Historians still argue whether those trace metals were intentional metal infusions or mere artifacts of vesselware. You squint through the lens, half expecting to see yeast cells wearing miniature silver crowns. Your mind tickles with a light joke. What did the archaeologists say to the yeast? You're a real culture. The slide's grid gleams in the lamp glow, and you suppress a smirk, mindful that bench partners take their sediment analyses very seriously. As you adjust the focus, the yeast blobs materialize, tiny ovoids clustering along the slide, some motile and twitching as though still eager to ferment malt. You watch, mesmerized, feeling the residue's soft shimmer against the dark background, a microscopic lagoon of bygone harvests. Historians still argue whether Hittite brewers maintained specialized yeast banks in temple cellars, continually feeding and reusing starter cultures season after season, or whether they relied on wild airborne yeasts captured in open fermentation troughs. Either scenario speaks to brewing sophistication far beyond crude accidental concoctions. You gently swirl the slide, imagining yourself stirring a massive vat of barley mash down in the palace's brewhouse. You can almost hear that distant gurgle, that primordial ASMR of life forming in liquid. You probably won't survive this if you try to reproduce it in your kitchen without dismantling the plumbing, so you stick to observation. A second light joke surfaces. Why don't scientists trust atoms in beer? Because they make up everything, including bubbles. You chuckle, the guffaw echoing softly against ceramic tile, then turn your attention back to the slide. The lead researcher beckons you over to a larger table where multiple slides await comparison. Some slides show yeast clusters tinged slightly green or red, evidence perhaps of added herbs or fruit extracts in specific ceremonial brews. You lean in, inhaling a faint whiff of ethanol vapor rising from a nearby flask, the scent oddly comforting in its antiquity. A mainstream historical fact residue analyses have also detected traces of coriander juniper and even pomegranate compounds within drinking vessels, suggesting Hittite ale recipes were complex and flavored with local botanicals rather than plain barley alone. You pipette a dye onto one slide, staining cell walls so that under ultraviolet light they glow like fluorescent fireflies. The lab's single bare bulb buzzes overhead, lending the moment a cinematic hush. Your eyelashes feel weighted as you watch colors bloom behind the glass. A fringe hypothesis flits through your thoughts. Some writers propose that silver's antimicrobial properties kept yeast cultures cleaner, leading to purer ferments. Historians still argue whether micro amounts of silver ions actually inhibited harmful bacteria or simply risked sidelining beneficial yeasts. You trace the shape of a glowing cell cluster, pondering if silver-lined vats were early bioreactors of sorts. Your third light joke drifts in. What did the silver say to the yeast? Don't worry, I've got a metal backup plan. You grin at your own pun, winking at an empty test tube as though it appreciates the humor. The researcher taps a chart showing genetic sequences extracted from yeast DNA, mapping them against modern strains. You point to a branch labeled Hittite ferment, astonished that these ancient microbes might represent an extinct lineage rescued in microscopic amber. It's like meeting a long-lost cousin at a family reunion. Only your cousin is microscopic and smells vaguely of barley. The lab's gentle hum, the flicker of lamplight, and the swirling yeast images converge into a lullaby of science and sorcery. You squint through the scope one last time, letting the rhythmic dance of cells soothe the edges of your consciousness. A brief scholarly debate surfaces in your mind. Did Hittite brewers view yeast as a sacred gift, each batch requiring blessing before inoculation, or as mere industrial starters, tools of production? Either perspective reveals a culture deeply invested in perfecting its potable craft. You stand, slide still perched on the stage, and take a final breath. A heady mix of ethanol resin and parchment from nearby cuneiform scrolls describing brewing rituals. You probably won't survive replicating those recipes exactly, but the sensory memory lingers, sweet warmth, herbal resonance, and metallic hinterlands. One final quip drifts through your drowsy mind. Why did the yeast break up with the brewer? It said the relationship was too one-sided. You let out a soft laugh, eyelids fluttering, as the lab's flickering shadows stitch silver threads through your dreams. With a final glance at the microscope's glowing field, you lift the vial of ancient residue, imagining each cell a spectral echo of clinking cups and hushed toasts echoing across millennia. You slip the vial into a velvet-lined box, your reluctant souvenir, and step away from the lab, guided by the promise of one last chapter before a wind-down lull beckons. You step into a vast twilight chamber where the soft glow of extinguished torches lingers like embers in the air, and the hush of history wraps around you like a silken cloak. The walls here bear faint traces of silver leaf and ale stains, silent echoes of countless feasts and toasts, long faded into memory. You probably won't survive this if you try to count every ghostly footprint, so breathe slowly and let the moment carry you toward rest. In the center of the room stands a low dais strewn with the artifacts you've encountered on your journey. Silver ingots shimmering like captured moonbeams, hammered pectorals echoing royal power, engraved seals still bearing the weight of sealed treaties, horned rhytons and silver cups dyed with the hues of ancient ales. You pause, fingertips grazing an electrum-encrusted applique, marveling at how raw earth became divine ritual. A mainstream historical fact. The Hittite Empire's mastery of silverwork and ale brewing underpinned both its political clout and its ceremonial grandeur, weaving metal and malt into the very fabric of society. You inhale the faint aroma of aged barley and metallic dust sensory signatures that have seeped into these stones over millennia. The chamber's silence hums with scholarly debates whether silver alloys emerged from Anatolian ingenuity or Mesopotamian influence, whether ale's flavor was shaped by cultivated yeast or wild ferment, whether ceremonial toasts bound treaties more tightly than ink on clay tablets. Historians still argue whether the true magic lay in metallurgy or fermentation or in the union of both. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. Fringe accounts suggest some Hittite kings wore miniature silver vessels as pendants, sipping ale through golden straws to demonstrate divine favor even in private. You imagine the royal morning routine: first a prayer, next a sip, then conquer. Historians still argue whether such straws existed or were fanciful exaggerations by court poets. You kneel by a silver-lined bowl that once held yeast starters, now empty but for a few stubborn crusts. Placing your palm near its rim, you sense a faint warmth, residual life force of microorganisms that fermented countless batches. You remember pipetting ancient residue beneath a microscope, watching yeast cells flicker like starlight. That microscopic dance now echoes in this hushed expanse, reminding you that even the smallest beings shaped great ceremonies. A second light. Joke surfaces. If a king drops his silver cup in this room, does it make a lasting impression? You snort softly, the pun dissolving into the chamber's stillness. Against one wall rests a battered wooden box, its lid carved with cuneiform glyphs naming temple brewers and workshop directors. You lift the lid and discover scraps of papyrus recipes for ale spiced with pomegranate honey and coriander. You run your fingers over the faded ink-tasting words on your tongue. Boil barley 3 times, cool by open air, bless by fire before the first pour. These instructions are echoes of voices long departed, yet their ritual persists in your mind's palate. You imagine a final feast here, the chamber alive with clinks of silver, murmured prayers, and the gentle hiss of foam settling atop spiced ale. As courtiers salute one another, the dais would have held platters of roasted grains and fragrant herbs, each dish arrayed beside a gleaming cup. The air would hum with conviviality and divine longing. Mortals and gods sharing fleeting communion through silver and ale. A third light joke floats to the surface. Why did the ale thank the workshop? Because it knew where to find its true craft. You grin, letting the pun echo into shadows. You stand and walk a slow circle around the dais, each step stirring memories of the mines, workshops, temples, and halls you've traversed. In each place, silver and ale coalesced into expressions of power, piety, and pleasure. Now, in this womb of twilight, their synergy reaches its quiet crescendo. The chamber's vault above you seems to breathe expanses of stone curling into darkness. You lift your gaze, imagining constellations in silver filigree overhead, a cosmic workshop where Earth's metal and sky's stars merge. The thought blurs the boundary between human craft and celestial forge, reminding you that silver work once aspired to mirror divine radiance. You lower your gaze to a final artifact, a small votive statuette of a bull cast in silver, its surface etched with barley stalks and crescent moons. Placing your hand on the bull's flank, you feel its balance, its weight both solid and ethereal. You murmur a silent farewell. May its memory guide your sleep as it guided ancient supplicants. A gentle hum rises behind you, the chamber's acoustics magnifying the soft resonance of distant water drips. Perhaps from a broken flask in an adjoining corridor or ancient water channels beneath the floor, the subtle sound entwines with your breath, weaving a lullaby of stone, metal, and memory. You turn to the exit, lantern light pooling at your feet as the chamber's door swings open on silent hinges. One final scholarly musing flits through your mind. The interplay of silver and ale in Hittite culture symbolized life's dualities, strength and softness, power and pleasure, earthbound craft and celestial wonder. Their legacy glints not only in museum displays but in every toast lifted and every ring hammered by hands, seeking beauty in base matter. You step into the corridor's glow, leaving the twilight chamber behind, carrying its echoes in your bones. The path forward is bathed in soft torchlight, each step guiding you toward softer dreams and deeper rest. Now let your thoughts settle like fine silver dust, drifting to a quiet hearth. Each memory of hammer strikes and frothy ales folding softly into shadows. Breathe in slowly and exhale gently as though releasing the final whisper of a tinkling cup. Every echo of metal on stone fades like stars at dawn, leaving only a gentle hum in the air. The scents of barley and resin slip away, replaced by the cool hush of night's embrace. Your heartbeat slows, sinking with the distant drip of water and the hushed breath of sleeping corridors. Picture yourself reclining on a plush bolster, linen sheets wrapping you as tenderness. The weight of silver ingots and the thrill of ceremonial ale have given way to the soft warmth in your chest, an ember of memory glowing beneath closed eyelids. Let the guardians of memory, those silent votive statuettes and engraved seals, stand watch over your dreams, their presence reassuring. Feel the cool touch of silver leaf and the gentle fizz of yeast now transformed into strands of sleep weaving through your mind. The world beyond these chambers recedes. No clinking cups, no ringing anvils, only the soft pulse of tranquility. Allow the chamber's final whispers, torches flicker, waters drip, hearts hush to guide you deeper into calm. So drift now, carried by currents of ancient laughter and solemn toasts, settling into velvet darkness where silver's gleam becomes the moon's glimmer through eyelids. May you sleep in the gentle cradle of history's quiet symphony, lulled by echoes of artisans and brewers who laid these echoes into time itself.